The barn still smells like him. Cedar and old hay, and something underneath that I never had a word for until I was much older. Quiet. My hands are shaking, though no one is watching me. Dust turns gold where the morning light cuts through the slats, the way it always did when I was small and forbidden past this door. I am 41 years old, and I am still afraid of a barn. Somewhere under this floor is the reason my grandfather, a bishop, never let anyone follow him inside. I'm Rebecca. This is a place where I tell the truths I carried quietly out of my community, one at a time, the way you'd hand someone something breakable. If stories like this about faith and the parts of it we don't talk about mean something to you, stay a while and subscribe. I'd love to know. Did your family have a room or a place no one was allowed to ask about? My grandfather was the bishop for almost 30 years. In our community, that word meant something enormous. It meant he decided who could be forgiven, and how long the forgiveness should take to earn. Men took their hats off a little straighter when he walked past. Women lowered their voices, not out of fear exactly, but out of a kind of reverence you don't unlearn easily. He carried the Ordnung the way another man might carry a Bible, not as a book, but as breath. And every single evening, just after supper, he walked to the barn alone, and no one, not my grandmother, not his own sons, was permitted to follow him. I used to think it was prayer. That's what we were told when we were young enough to still ask questions out loud. Your grandfather goes to speak with God, my mother would say, in the tone she used for things she didn't want examined further. I remember being 6 years old, pressing my face against the cold glass of the kitchen window, watching his lantern bob across the yard like a slow, private star. I wanted so badly to know what a man says to God that he can't say inside his own house, surrounded by his own family. By the time I was 10, I had stopped asking. Not because I understood, but because I had learned the shape of the silence around it. There are things in a family like ours that get a kind of fence built around them without anyone ever nailing a board. You just learn by watching. Faces, which doors stay closed. When I asked my aunt once, over quilting, why grandfather never let anyone into the barn with him, she went very still, the needle stopped mid-stitch, and she said only, "Some things are between a man and his conscience, Rebecca." I didn't know yet that conscience was the right word. I thought she meant God. I know now she meant something closer to the ground. Our community was not unkind. I want to say that clearly because I know what people expect to hear when a story like this begins. There were singings on Sunday nights, boys and girls sitting across long tables from each other, voices rising together in the old Osbund hymns until the windows nearly hummed with it. There was a frolic every harvest, whole families raising a barn in a single day, women passing pie plates hand to hand like something sacred. There was real love in the plainness, real peace in the Gelassenheit we were taught, the yielding, the letting go of your own will for something larger. I don't say any of this to excuse what I later found. I say it because both things were true at once, and it took me most of my adult life to hold them in the same hand without dropping one. My grandfather died 4 years ago, in the spring, the way a man like him would have wanted, quietly, in his own bed, with his boots by the door as if he expected to need them again. It took our family almost 2 years to decide what to do with the farm, and it fell to me, as the eldest granddaughter, to clean out the barn before the new owners came. I told myself it would take an afternoon. I did not tell myself the truth, which was that I had been waiting 35 years to walk through that door without being told to turn around. The barn was smaller than I remembered, the way places from childhood always are. Cobwebs threaded the rafters like something someone had started weaving on purpose, and then abandoned. I moved through it slowly, touching things I wasn't sure I was allowed to touch even now, his old tools, a coil of rope gone stiff with age, a lantern with a cracked chimney sitting exactly where I remembered it 30 years ago. And then, in the far corner, under a horse blanket that had gone brittle with dust, I found it. A wooden box, small enough to hold in 2 hands, with a lock on the front that had rusted nearly shut.
I did not open it that day.
I want you to understand that I stood there for almost 10 minutes with my hands wrapped around it, and I did not open it. Something in me, the same something that used to press its face against the kitchen window, was afraid that whatever was inside would take my grandfather away from me a second time, in a different way than death had. I thought of my friend Ruth, 3 farms over, who told me once, years before, in a voice gone flat with old grief, that she used to find things in her own husband's coat pockets that she chose never to ask about. Some doors, she said, you leave shut because you already know you can live with what's behind the first one you opened. I hadn't understood her then. Standing in that barn, box in my hands, I understood her completely. I carried it inside, set it on my grandmother's old kitchen table, and sat with it until the light outside went the color of a bruise. My hands found the lock again. It gave, with a small sound, like something exhaling after a very long time. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied together with the same kind of twine we used for bundling hay. The paper had gone soft and yellow at the folds, the way paper does when it's been opened and closed by the same hands too many times to count. Each one was addressed in my grandfather's careful, upright script to a name I did not recognize, Daniel Yoder. I sat with that name for a long moment, turning it over, waiting for a memory to surface. None came. We did not have a Daniel Yoder in our family, not that I had ever been told. It was the third letter that explained the first. My grandfather had a younger brother, it turned out, an older brother actually born 9 years before him, who had left the community as a young man and been placed under the Meidung, the Shunning, for reasons the letters never stated plainly. In our world, that word carries a weight I'm not sure I can translate for you. It doesn't simply mean goodbye. It means a person can sit at your table, and you are not permitted to pass them the bread. It means your own mother can be dying in the next room, and custom may still keep you from her bedside. Daniel Yoder had been that brother. And for almost 28 years, while our whole family spoke of him only as a cautionary tale, a name mentioned in low voices and then dropped, my grandfather had been walking to that barn every single evening to write to him. Not just to write. The later letters mentioned money, folded inside on more than one occasion. Enough for a winter's coal, enough for a doctor's visit once, when Daniel's daughter had taken ill. There were small drawings tucked among the pages too, done in a child's hand, signed Love, your niece, a niece my grandfather had apparently never once been permitted to meet in the community's eyes, but who he had clearly written back to for years, tucking his replies inside the same envelopes, sending them through a driver he must have paid to carry them quietly into town. My grandfather, the bishop, the man who upheld the Ordnung with both hands for 30 years, had spent nearly 3 decades secretly breaking the very rule he was chosen to enforce. I sat with that for a long time before I let myself feel anything about it. My first instinct, I'm ashamed to say, was something close to betrayal, as if the man who taught me what integrity meant had been quietly living outside of it the whole time. But the more letters I opened, the more I understood that it wasn't a betrayal at all. It was the opposite. He believed in the Ordnung the way you believe in the ground under a house. Necessary, load-bearing, not something you tear out on a whim. And he loved his brother the way you love blood, helplessly, without a vote in the matter. He was not choosing between 2 lies. He was choosing between 2 things that were both entirely true, and he had decided, quietly, without asking anyone's permission, that love did not have to announce itself to be real. I thought then of Ruth, and the coat pockets she never searched. I understood, finally, what she had been trying to tell me. She hadn't been protecting herself from a betrayal. She had been protecting a private mercy her husband had been carrying alone, the same way my grandfather had been carrying his, because some good things in our world can only survive if no one is allowed to ask about them out loud. Ruth's husband, it turned out, years later had been doing something almost identical, quietly sending grain to a cousin who'd been put out of fellowship 2 counties over. Neither man ever told his wife directly. Both women found out only after their husbands were gone. 2 barns, 2 boxes. The same kind of silence, holding the same kind of love. I don't think my grandfather was a rebel. I think he was a man who understood something the rest of us were still learning, that the rules we build to hold a community together are not the same thing as the love that holds a family together, and that sometimes a good man has to serve both, in 2 different rooms, with the door shut on one so the other can survive. He never once, in any letter I read, spoke a single word against the Ordnung. He simply loved his brother more than he was willing to let the rule decide for him. Both things were true. They had always been true. It only took me 35 years and one locked box to be able to hold them at the same time. I still go back to that barn sometimes, even though the new owners have long since filled it with their own tools and their own quiet. I stand in the doorway for a minute, the way I used to stand at the kitchen window, and I think about how much of what shaped me was never spoken, only carried, evening after evening, by someone who never once asked to be understood for it. I wonder, now, what I might have missed in the people closest to me, what small mercies they might be walking somewhere alone to protect, right now, without a word to anyone. Maybe you have a barn of your own, a door you've never opened, or one you're still afraid to. If you do, I hope when the time comes, you find what my grandfather left behind, not scandal but proof that he loved someone the whole time no one was watching.